Horses Now podcast, your go-to source for everything in the world of horse racing. I'm your host, T. Ridge. As always, I'm joined in studio by Mr. Kenny McPeek. Kenny, what's happening, my man?
It's pretty zippy music you got on there.
I love the music. I just like listening to it, you know? And kind of at the end, I just let it go as long as possible. So I like the music. What's up, my man? How are you?
Good.
So today's topic is going to be the Triple Crown Trail. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive in and explain basically what the Triple Crown Trail is and its significance in preparing horses for the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont, you name it. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of get into that a little bit here, Kenny. How do trainers decide which races to target on the trail leading up to the Triple Crown?
Well, first of all, there are a select group of guys or girls that get these kind of horses. And it's
not everybody.
No, and these types of horses are really hard to come by, and they start developing through the summer of their 2-year-old year, into the fall. You start getting clarity on who the good young horses are, and then sometimes these types of horses come out of the woodwork. Now, for those that don't understand the Triple Crown Trail, the Kentucky Derby is a straight 3-year-old race at 1.25 miles, and I suppose we should include the Fillies. The Kentucky Oaks is a straight 3-year-old filly race at 1.125 miles. Then you have the Preakness, which is 2 weeks later at 1 3/16 miles. And then you have the Belmont Stakes, which this year will be in Saratoga Springs, New York, run at 1.25 miles. However, historically, this was at 1.5 miles at Belmont Park, and it will shift back to Belmont at some point because they're redoing that facility.
Okay.
So these types of horses, you want to see a 2-year-old colt, 2-year-old filly that can handle the distance of at least 1 mile, 1 1/16 miles. And really, Churchill Downs controls the direction of these races because the point system going into the Kentucky Derby is significant in that you have to have points, and because that field typically overfills, they allow the horses in on points.
Okay.
In the past, we had the Triple Crown Challenge, which gave a $5 million bonus to a horse that won all 3 races, the Derby, Preakness, and Belmont.
Doesn't happen much.
No, Visa used to give away a really nice bonus for
I remember that.
And a lot of gear for it, too.
I remember that. I used to promote that all the time.
I don't think anybody ever won it. And then after they got rid of it, then, of course, Bob Baffert's had American Pharaoh and Justify.
That's right.
So that is that kind of changed the dynamic. So the Preakness and the Belmont aren't really races that the point system really comes into play.
Because it's kind of after the fact.
Well, it's after the Derby, but there is this kind of media focus in on all 3 races going into the spring.
Yeah.
And horses go different directions. So you can have horses that participate in South Florida racing, and specifically the colts down there where you have the Holy Bull, you have the Fountain of Youth, and then you have the Florida Derby. And so that Florida route has been very successful for a lot of really nice horses over the years. Harlan's Holiday was a horse that I brought in through the Florida route. Then in Louisiana, you have races. Well, there's a new one, the Gun Runner. Then you have the Risen Star, and then you also have the Louisiana Derby. Mm-hmm. And I believe there's another one in between there. Le Comp is another local race down there that's becoming more prominent. All these races that I'm touching on have points.
Right.
And Churchill Downs decides the points for each race. And then you have Oaklawn, where you have...
Kenny, is that crazy? How does Churchill Downs... What made them the authority to...
They made themselves the authority.
They just run the show.
Yeah, well, they can try to predict which races have more importance.
I understand they made themselves authority, but how did that happen over time?
Well, the Kentucky Derby is such a kind of a race that's talked about, and myself, I prefer the graded stakes route. Horses that have won graded stakes money, I think should get preference. The Breeders' Cup Juvenile Colts race I think is only 20 points or 10 points. I can't remember the numbers right now. And that would be champion 2-year-old. Should that horse get in the Derby? If he's running well. I think what they want currency. Horses that are running well now.
I get all that, and all that makes sense. Okay, let me ask you this question. Obviously, the Derby is for the 3-year-olds. The Oaks is for the 3-year-olds. Is that when a racehorse is at their peak? Is it 3 years old?
I don't think so. I think they're probably fall of the 4-year-old year. They're a little bigger and stronger.
Well, why is that the number then? Why is it 3-year-olds in those two races?
This is all modeled after the English Derby, the English Oaks. These are races that are run in Epsom Downs in England, and the Kentucky Derby. The Epsom Derby has been historically it was the first significant 3-year-old race, and they ran that restricted 3-year-olds.
Got it.
So here in America, we emulated English racing, although we go the other direction. Although the English Derby runs left-handed,
And they go up and down hills.
well, they go up and down hills, similar to Kentucky Downs. But the English Derby was the forerunner, and then since then, the English Derbies from the 1700s. Actually, would need to look up when the first one was run.
Okay.
But the Kentucky Derby first race was 1875.
Okay.
And then New York, I believe the Travers ran even before that.
Wow.
The Preakness is an old race. Off the top of my head, I can't pull down exactly which one's older than the other.
Okay.
But they've been prominent in their own areas. Obviously Kentucky, Maryland, and then New York. And logistically, that's not a terrible trip for most horses. But think about it. When this was done back in the early 1900s, how difficult it would have been. They trained horses and put them on a train. So it was a lot different. Now we put them on a plane.
Yeah, now we FedEx horses.
Yeah, exactly. but I'm skipping. California has Triple Crown points. Japan, they have win in your ends over there. They've got a couple of races in England.
What about Dubai? It seems like there's always Dubai horses.
Yeah, there's a UAE Derby has points for the Derby. I'm not sure if Saudi does yet, but they're trying. I think specifically the Japanese will someday win this race.
Yeah. They haven't yet though, right?
They haven't. No, the closest they came was this year with Forever Young.
Oh, that was a great horse too. Yeah.
He ran a very, very good race to be third. And I think the betting pools in Japan are really what motivate Churchill to add them to the Triple Crown series.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you've got other tracks that have a signature race. Turfway Park has some races that get Triple Crown points. Remington has one or two.
Okay.
You've got New York Racing has points. And so they kind of decide according to the strength of the schedule. And I think it's very arbitrary to some extent in that then I don't know how you can black and white something like that. It's just a best guess scenario on which races get more points.
Which one's the most critical to you?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I've always thought the Bluegrass was a great prep race. The Florida Derby is a great prep race. The timing of the Louisiana Derby and Arkansas Derby are both timed really well. So you're going to get stars coming from all those. And what Churchill really wants is the best horses coming into Churchill from those particular races. The Santa Anita Derby in California.
All right. Walk me back here. So let's talk Mystic Dan here. So Mystic Dan's obviously the current Kentucky Derby champion. What did his Triple Crown Trail look like before he got to the Derby?
Well, he actually didn't run well in his first Derby prep.
Do you remember what it was? What race it was?
The Smarty Jones at Oaklawn.
Yeah.
I believe that's the name of it. And he ran fifth and didn't rate and was still learning how to go 2 turns. And then we backed up and we won the Southwest with him impressively in the mud. And he really went into that locked and loaded. And then we sat on him and waited for the Arkansas Derby. We kind of put all our eggs in that basket.
Okay.
Because
at that point, so point wise, he'd had a few points for the Derby, right?
He barely got in. If he hadn't been third in the Arkansas Derby,
he wouldn't have gotten in.
If he'd been fourth, he wouldn't have gotten in.
Got it.
Yeah.
So he ran third in the Arkansas Derby, and then you knew you had a premonition that he was going to do pretty well on the day of the Derby.
Well, we just waited for the Derby, and we gambled that we were going to have enough points, and we did, and he got in, and of course he fired his best shot, and that's what you have to do Derby day.
Yeah.
I've had horses that I brought into the Derby that I ran too many times. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. If I don't run enough, I don't get points. If I run too much, I've got a tired horse by spring.
Yep.
And so you've got to really figure out what's best for the horse and trying to get the points. And then you're going to get pressure to go into races to get more points.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, maybe you've got enough points early on. But they really I think the point system encourages horses to run during those, Florida Derby, Louisiana Derby, Arkansas Derby, Wood Memorial, Santa Anita Derby, those races in particular. I think those are probably the 5 off the top of my head. Tampa Bay Derby's also got some points allotted. And you can go online and look up the Triple Crown points trail and system. I mean, it's I'm pretty sure it's on the Churchill Downs website or KentuckyDerby.com. It'll all be on there. And they will mark, when the races run, they'll mark the points and how many, which horses got points. And then,
so you can follow along right there.
Yeah, and when they do the future wager, then you've got an idea who's got points, who's got the best shot of getting in. And right now it's really early. I think only a few races have points, and I think we ran one in September, and then the Breeders' Futurity got points, and then this weekend we have the Kentucky Jockey Club as a points race.
Okay.
Winner of the Kentucky Jockey Club is typically kind of put probably in the top 5 immediately.
Now, do you have somebody running in that?
Render Judgment.
What do you think?
I think he's a big shot. He's going to be a horse that wants added distance. Coming out of this race, he'll be pointed towards the fairgrounds because I think he wants all the ground he can get. And the Louisiana Derby in particular is 1 mile and 3/16.
Okay.
So the distance of that race it's a race that Sierra Leone won, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the added distance it matters all that much, and you're going to run that 1.25 miles in Kentucky. So the Louisiana Derby, I think, is going to be a good setup for that colt.
I've never quite understood that, Kenny. So, and this is kind of my next question: how do track conditions and distances, in particular, how do they play as far as preparation? And what big of a factor do they play in prepping these horses for these big stake races?
Well,
because they're all different, right? The distances are all a little bit different.
Well, some tracks will run a mile race, and some will run 1 mile and 1/16, and some will run 1 mile and 1/8, and then 1 mile and 3/16 at the fairgrounds. But for the most part, how far they go and the pace of these races is tricky too, because sometimes the added distance, the pace might be slow. A horse that's a closer can't get there because the pace or the race turned into what I'd call a sprint home.
Right.
And then the Derby typically is a high-paced race where there is speed and everybody's kind of hustling to get in position.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you get a horse that comes from way last, like Rich Strike, doing it.
Yeah.
So weird things can happen, and that's why people take shots.
Yeah, because you never know.
Yeah. One of the things I don't like about the point system, being perfectly honest with Churchill, is that two things. One, it excludes fillies, which I think is ridiculous.
Do you think Fillies should have a chance?
Well, I think the leading point-getting filly in the Oaks Trail should have the option to run. There any reason in the world why you wouldn't make it more interesting if she had an option to run. You could even say the top 3 point-getting fillies would have an option to run.
Interesting. Do you think they do that to make the Oaks better?
I don't know why they do it, but I've told a lot of the guys, and of course I'm friends with most all the Churchill team, that they really need to consider letting a filly run. Or at least
look at Torpedo Anna. Hey, she showed in the Travers.
I think she would have been competitive, but
she showed in the Travers. She could do it.
But I wanted to win an Oaks, so I didn't want to get
I get that. I get that.
But you really want the talk. What Bonnie Raitt say? Let's give them something to talk about.
Yeah.
And if you have that talk out there, there's nothing negative about it, other than it lifts, the sport of conversation. And so here we're having this conversation. I really would like to see Churchill include the Oaks fillies as nothing else. They should have an option to get in.
Kenny, I don't want to get political here because this is not what we do. But when you look at male and female, so if you take the best track runner, male track runner, he's going to demolish the best female track runner. It just is what it is, right? It's genetics. But that's my question. Racehorses are different, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's just they're not, they don't have the same genetic differences that males and females have.
Fillies are definitely a little bit lighter. Fillies get a 5-pound weight allowance, which is something we took advantage of in the Travers when we were second. And it is that they do give them a weight allowance. And in some cases they don't need it. I mean, I've seen fillies win the Breeders' Cup turf, mile. The Europeans are much more aggressive as far as running fillies against colts. Here in the United States, it's kind of out of the box when you do it.
Yep.
I've done it a couple times.
Yeah, well, obviously,
Swiss got over, obviously Preakness. She ran in the Bluegrass against colts. I would really wanted to see her be the first filly to ever win the Bluegrass. Heard Travers Run was big,
Yep.
or Torpedo, but it just depends. And then I didn't finish my train of thought on the other thing that bothers me. What bothers me about this point system is that you will get obscure horses entering in races, and in some cases without a shot, but they crowd the field. And you see maidens entering in points races against very talented horses, but you get maidens clogging up the field, just taking a shot to get points to get in. And
so there should be something against that.
Well, but it adds to the traffic of the race, and it adds to what can go wrong for a horse that really deserves to win. And I can remember I think at Gulfstream one year, horse 80 or 90, 100 to 1 shot, and he did run well. He ran second in the Florida Derby. Well, I got him points to get in the Kentucky Derby.
Wow.
So he goes in the Derby as a maiden, which, you've got other horses that were maybe more qualified, and even running fourth can be the difference in a few points to get in.
Kenny, when you say maiden, and I know 99% of our listeners are going to know what that means, but we did have a question not long ago from a listener that said, hey, I'm brand new to horse racing. This has been fantastic for me. When you say maiden, that means they've never won a race.
Never won a race. And you have different types of maiden races. You have maiden special weight, which is a weight assigned to what time of year that they're racing that horse. 2-year-olds, and they gain weight as they go through the season. Then you have maiden claiming races, where that horse can be bought.
Got it.
Sold. But yeah, maiden race is a horse. A maiden is a horse that's never won. Never won 2, hasn't won 2. It's easy. A other than allowance race. So what that means is that a horse has never won a race other than a maiden claiming optional, or in some cases starter. So you have to look at when we went through those PPs last week, you look through the language and read the language so you know the difference. But maidens in particular are pretty simple.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So let's talk about preparing horses here. What qualities do you look for in a horse to determine whether or not they have Triple Crown potential?
Well, 2 things. They need turn of foot, which you start learning earlier.
Turn of foot. What does that mean?
How fast they can go from the quarter pole to the wire.
Got it.
So early on, we teach our horses to sprint from the quarter pole to the wire. But then what I'd call a Derby horse is a horse that's a good traveler, in that they move easily across the ground until they have to have that.
Kind of look like they're floating.
Yeah, they're very efficient horses with turn of foot. Boom, they fire that bullet. You don't want a jockey that utilizes the horse too much early or in the middle of the race, because you want to save that energy for the finish. And so it takes a horse that's very efficient. It takes a horse that's got good wind, a good mind, to be able to handle the adversity of a horse inside, outside, and front, splitting horses, making moves into the race. And the two best runs I had in Triple Crown races was Swiss Skydiver made a move in between horses that you just can't. She was like a Maserati just going right through there. And then Mystic Dan had a similar move this past spring. So they need that turn of foot, like that boom, I can hit that hole and go. And not all horses have it. For that matter, most don't.
So I love this turn of foot term. That one's new to me, but that makes a ton of sense. Kenny, when you have, often we look at these race horses, when bettors look at them, they look at the numbers on paper. They look at them as just, machines in a lot of ways. Have you had horses who don't want to come from behind? They want to be in front of everybody the whole time?
Yep, for sure. Had plenty of them in my career. For me, that's a problem. Because
that's a problem.
Yeah, because they're dictated by the pace of the race.
Yeah, so if they've got to go out real fast.
Yeah, and if somebody presses them and they go with them and they don't have the mindset to settle off other horses, then they become pace compromised, and they can be controlled by another horse in the race that can melt them down early. And that's one of the reasons why we probably lose more of our first-time starters, because I'm usually trying to teach a horse to settle back in there and get used to the dirt in their face, get used to the adversity, learn to go inside, outside. When they learn those lessons, they develop better.
Okay.
But if a young horse is sent first time out mentally, sometimes you don't get them back. And you have to teach them to, hey, okay, just relax, pace yourself, because you're really, I think we've talked about it before. The energy, when you start the Kentucky Derby, you're braking to the first turn, then you have to just get rhythm,
Yeah.
and then you have to have that turn of foot from the middle of the turn to the wire or the quarter pole to the wire, and that's where the speed comes in. But they have to learn to settle through all that.
Do horses know when they hit the wire?
We try to teach them to hit the wire. We work hard to try to what I would call repetition, where they understand that they're going from here to there, and then they're done.
And then they're done. And then they know they're done after that.
Yes. Finish to the wire.
And so that's all about it. That makes sense.
Wire.
It's about reps, right? It's just about getting them out there and running them.
Repetition. Completely. I think a good horse picks it up real quick. Some horses are a little slower than others. And how they're ridden in their first few starts matters, because they have to be taught during that portion of their careers what to do. And this is where Brian is really a big help to our operation, because he does teach a lot of our young horses how to break, settle, finish.
Break, settle, finish. I like that. All right. It's amazing how much, not only myself, but I get this from avid horse officiant people that just feel like they learn something every time they hear one of these podcasts, Kenny. So this is great stuff. All right. What role does timing play in choosing races on the trail, and how do you avoid over racing a horse? Now, you talked about how you could tire out a horse, right? That's part of being a trainer, is knowing which races to run and when.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all about timing, and it really depends on the energy level and the eating habits of each horse.
Eating habits, okay.
Yeah, the better they eat, the faster they eat, the faster they run. I
Really?
firmly believe that. When a horse is eating really well, they run well. When a horse isn't eating well, they don't run well. So we spend a lot of time. We have night watching. My man Eric Saul's out there. Every horse in the barn by midnight, he's sending me a message on who ate, who didn't eat, and I try to get these from every division. So the good eaters are horses that are typically healthy. They have good gut function. They have good appetite's important, and our job is to be able to recognize when horses aren't eating well. Now, if a horse runs really hard and then backs out of their feed tub the night after the race, then you know that, okay, I need to probably back up a little bit and take my time coming out of this race, because that horse was a little stressed coming out of the run. If they run, let's say they win easily, and they dive into the feed tub that night and they knock it out early, then that gives me the hint that, okay, I could probably come back a little quicker with this one, but you have to watch it every day, every night. Torpedo Anna, of course, she's a star of the show recently.
Sure.
Is a great eater.
Right.
Oh, my God. She eats better than I do.
Right.
I mean, she just knocks it out. And a lot of fillies, they run hard and then they back out of the feed tub, and then you're trying to, and you have to space them a little bit more because of that. But it's it's definitely all artistic, and it is a trainer thing to know when to go back quickly and when not to.
The eating part's fascinating. Does it matter what they're eating?
Well, we use Hallway Race 13, which is a fabulous feed. Lee Hall kind of contributed to the development of it, but it's full of 13% fat. It's got protein. It's got
but it's hay.
Vitamins. No, this is a racehorse feed.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
I don't know. It's a mishmash. I'd have to bring some and show it to you.
Okay. All right.
But the horses love it.
Do they?
And they perform well on it. And I think it's got the right ingredients we don't have to mix it. It's a pre-mixed feed. And that's one of the things that I encouraged Lee when he developed it, is that put a lot of the vitamins in there, put all the supplements in there, spin it, bring it to me, and then we just drop it out of the bag. So it makes our job easier. Some trainers cook their oats.
Yep.
Some trainers use sweet feed, oats. They mix and add their own things. When you get to a certain stage or level, it's impossible to quality control that. So you get maybe one assistant gives too much oats and another one gives too much sweet feed, and one of them doesn't add the salt and doesn't add the electrolytes. So we've developed, or the industry has developed, and Lee Hall in particular developed probably one of the best pre-mixed race feeds ever.
Have you ever experienced with the food?
It goes worldwide, that feed.
Have you experienced with different types of foods, different types of things?
Every now and then you get a horse that doesn't like it, but not too many. And then every now and then you can't get it certain places, but typically, I mean, it's available everywhere, and their distribution network's strong. But yeah, every now and then, like the horse Tahano Run, who was a Derby horse for me back in the 90s, was a horse that had gut issues.
Okay.
And at one point in time, he ate pellets because they were much better to digest for him.
Okay.
And he had a stomach issue as a 2-year-old and actually had a colic surgery, but he digested that better. But I always wonder, if he hadn't had that stomach issue, he was one of the best horses I ever trained too. Fantastic horse.
What kind of treats? We know that Torpedo Anna loves peppermints. So, other treats that horses like?
Carrots, apples.
I was going to say, I know I've seen horses eat apples before.
Yeah, I encourage the stable staff that if they'll deliver the carrots and apples, no problem.
Can they eat too much of that?
No, not really. No, I actually probably prefer carrots more than apples. Yeah, we've regularly kept those around. And then, the peppermints, I mean, she's probably got cavities from all the peppermints she's eaten.
I bet.
But she loves them, and we try to keep it at some sort of limit there. Quantity limit.
So how has the Triple Crown Trail evolved over the years, Kenny? Now, we talked about, the big purse fee if you'd won the 3 Triple Crown races. How has it evolved for you, in your opinion? And then do you see any changes on the horizon?
Well, since my career, it hadn't changed too much, although some of the dates have shifted.
Yeah. And I'm sure some of the races are probably more prominent now than were before and that type of thing.
Well, the Bluegrass used to be 9 days before the Kentucky Derby. The Derby trial was 7 days before the Kentucky Derby.
What?
Yeah, and these are races that the winner regularly came back and won. I think the advent of Lasix, or the bringing that into the sport, really hurt the Triple Crown, because you couldn't run horses back as quick when they were racing on Lasix. And then I think since they've gotten it out of the graded races, it's been really good for the Triple Crown.
Sure.
I actually think without Lasix is no problem. I think it's good, but I think that did affect the dynamic of the Triple Crown Trail, because horses were spacing their races a lot more, and it was just a trainer's mindset is a little different when we were running on Lasix. I feel like I can run a horse back quicker without Lasix.
Sure.
But once again, it depends on the horse and depends on the trainer and the timing.
Again, fascinating stuff. Kenny, the time has absolutely flown in this podcast. Last question. What are you looking most forward to for this Triple Crown Trail this upcoming year, both as a trainer and as of a fan of the sport?
Well, I've got some contenders out there. We had a filly Golden Gamble win the other day by 10.
Golden Gamble?
Yeah, no, my goodness. She's going to take us right back to the Kentucky Oaks. She's owned by Paul Fireman, Fern Circle Stable.
Can you go back to back?
I think I can. I think I could. It wouldn't surprise me if Render Judgment's a Kentucky Derby horse, a big, strong, serious horse, very good mind, nice, solid, sound horse. Wouldn't surprise me if he made it in there. And I've got a list of other ones that are out there, or that are just kind of coming around. And I think I've said before, our 2-year-old crop is a little bit late coming around, but we've got some real bullets in there that if you go back to last year, Mystic Dan and Torpedo Anna were just normal horses in the stable then, and of course, 6 months later,
they're stars.
Changed. So that's part of the evolution and the challenge of it all. And
well, they're so young too. I mean, they're going to develop so quickly between that 2 and 3, anyways.
They can, yeah. We have to watch a lot of details doing it.
Do you ever get any surprises? Does that happen much in the game where a horse just falls in your lap that maybe somebody else had trained, that all of a sudden they're like, hey, we want Kenny McPeek to train this horse? Does that ever happen much, or do you normally have them for a long period of time?
Sarava was a horse that I didn't have very long. He actually came to me practically by accident, and I got him in late December of his 2-year-old year. He had won his maiden and actually was second in that race. And then the horse had a lot of issues. He had a third of his hoof had gotten infected. He had a real bad hoof disease there. It took us a long time to get him ready, but then he runs second in a couple of allowance races, and we made the decision to run him in a little race called the Sir Barton Preakness Day, and he wins. And then we said, let's put him in the Belmont, almost as an afterthought. But I actually I ran bad in the Belmont in '98.
Okay.
I said, well, if we get him up there early, I think he might have a shot. And we trained him over Belmont, and sure enough, he jumped up and won.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a bit of a, even today, kind of a head scratching. Did he win? Was that a miracle?
Right.
But he ran the race of his life on the right day, and that was a horse that I'm really proud of in the sense that horse had a lot of little issues. And that was the last time I ran the horse. The horse subsequently went out to Bob Baffert in California because they wanted to win the Breeders' Cup, but Bob never could win with the horse. But he was a great, really good little horse, but he wasn't a horse that I developed, picked, or anything. I ran him 4 times for the client, and that was that. That's one, but it doesn't sound like it happens all that often. No, not too often. I mean, most of our success has been from horses that either I bought at auction or I started early on. And I think one of the values with you, Kenny, and at least now, all the horses you get involved with, you have an equity stake in. To me as an owner, I would prefer that because you got some skin in the game. Yeah, not all of them. No, I didn't have equity stake in Mystic Dan. Okay. Yeah, wished I did. Yeah, I bet. I bet. It just depends. I mean, Classic Causeway is a horse I didn't have any equity stake in, but when I buy them as yearlings, I like to be involved in right. That. But not always. I don't have to be. And actually, I was doing the math on it the other day. It's a pretty big number. I don't know if I ought to back off some of those. I think we're pushing well over 100 that we own 10%. That you have. Yeah. That's a lot of money. Yeah, that's a lot of upkeep money. Part of Torpedo Anna, so that's a good one. Yes, it's a good one to have some equity in. Yeah. All right, Kenny. Well, I appreciate it once again for joining us for this podcast. And if you're interested to learning more and want to be in the know, please hit that subscribe button. Give us a 5-star rating. And thank you for joining us for this version of the Horses Now podcast. See you at the races. And then I think one of our next shows will probably be, I'll probably be traveling then. Okay. We'll see. I'm going to be in and out of Kentucky during the holidays, but if we have to Zoom it, we'll Zoom it. All right. All right, gang. See you at the races. All right.